is that I think this is a period, this global modernity of ours, which is very different from the modernity of the national state and the nation-state project. Our global modernity is making unstable the meanings that we generated in that modernity of the national state. And that is why I am continuously, decade after decade, opening up new ground in these last 30 years for analysis and for research and interpretation. The city, it's a beautiful word, but it is a profoundly unstable meaning. And Rita Veloso. So the question really is, for me, not so much what is a city, because you can give too many answers to that. The question is, what does the city make legible? Whatever the kind of city it might be, doesn't matter. But what matters is, does the city, does urban space make legible, visible, operations, conditions, new trends, new disassemblings, new ruptures, that other spaces, the multinational corporation, financial markets, the national state, national geography, whatever, do not allow us to see. So for instance, with the global city, since you brought it up, the global city for me, one element, that it is one, the global city is that space which makes legible one moment, please read my lips here, right? One moment of a complex process, global capital, that is mostly marked by private, inaccessible spaces, invisible, we can't engage it. The global city is one necessary moment, it's only one, the territorial moment of a vast amount of global capital that might be highly mobile, might be partly electronic, as in the case of finance. In that one moment, it hits the ground. And in that process of hitting the ground, it becomes men and women who want it all, and get it all. And because they get it all, they become vulnerable. Because then we can see. And we can see injustice. We can see, we can see the separations. So just a little footnote. What are the mechanisms that make this possible? In 1980, before this phase really began, but it was about to begin, the top 1% got 12%. 12% to 44%, that's quite a rate of increase. In fact, I have some slides, I didn't want to show all these slides about the United States, where it shows that this rate is very, very significant. So that is just an illustration to signal that one kind of legibility that the city provides. Now, I want to return to this notion at the bottom of these cities, when you have lots of immigrants, or a lot of subcultures, that is where an internationalism happens. So the fact that you have a good education and you travel to Europe every year to go to the museums, that does not necessarily make you an internationalist like all those immigrants in the kitchen of a big and fast-moving restaurant, And the city allows you to see this. If you just produce it like an abstraction, you wouldn't be able to see that. But so anyhow, that is a first subject that I wanted to sort of elaborate just a bit about. The notion that at a time when stable meanings are becoming unstable, the city is one space that allows you to see some of the transformations. Second theme, because the argument that I'm really making, let me just put it on the table. I think that in this era, the specialized differences of cities matter much more than is sort of generally assumed. Secondly, they matter more than they mattered during the Keynesian period. And thirdly, cities do not compete with each other as much as is generally maintained. Now, I consider these very important observations, findings, because it means that we are taking away some power from very, you know, from multinational corporations, from financial firms, etc., that can keep saying, you know, we don't need you, you need us for jobs, etc., for investment, for consumption. We can go to any city. And creates all this notion of, you know, divide and conquer a bit, right? So I really care about, but we have to take it beyond just saying, no, cities don't compete as much as everybody says, because, you know, that's just not enough. So let me just give you a couple of the things that really come out of my research. First, what globalization has produced, I mean, vis-a-vis this whole question of the built environment of cities, is a globalizing of standards of production. So there is the state-of-the-art airport, the state-of-the-art highways that take you to the airport, the state-of-the-art office district, state-of-the-art luxury consumption space, state-of-the-art high-income residence. The standards for producing those spaces are indeed standardized across the world. Not for everything in every country, but for the high-end, you know, that hyperspace, if you want. The question is, are those, let me just focus on office buildings because it's easier. Are those standardized in terms of production? By the way, no matter how brilliant the architect and all the things that they change about it, but are they actually office buildings the way they used to be, where it was clear that a building, the language that a building had, the speech act, el acto de comunicar, is, I'm about office jobs. And they were. Most of the people were office workers. Today, there are no office workers in those states. Has 4 major financial centers. Shanghai, Hong Kong, Beijing, and Shenzhen. They're all different. When Hong Kong was going to be returned to the Chinese, the notion was, Hong Kong is going to die. Shanghai will replace it as a financial center. And I remember I wrote an article in '97 for Foreign Affairs, which circulated quite a bit. I said, no way, they are so different. And in fact, that's the case today. Same thing in New York. Chicago and New York are the 2 main financial centers. They don't compete with each other. Sao Paulo and Rio probably compete far less with each other on whatever the range than one might think from a distance if you're not a Brazilian and you don't really know. And one way that I empirically try to measure this is I try to understand what are the many circuits, specialized circuits, but also cultural, you know, economic, of questions of scientific knowledge or technical knowledge is probably more typical. What are the many different circuits on it? But the main issue is a political economy of difference, that if cities and their leaderships could work on this, they could actually contest global capital and its claims. And yes, you need the firms, they bring you jobs, etc. But you could demand much more from these firms. I say this to cities all around the world. I'm not saying that I mean, Lula was very good about changing some of these logics, you know, re-narrating. Now, I want to sort of move to a bit of a theoretical moment now. This type of analysis, you know, every one of my reaction, partly because of that framing, that I think this is a time when stabilized meanings become unstable. My first reaction is to say, this explanation is so powerful, it illuminates so much in the circle of light that it makes. Like, you know, at night, the proverbial story, dark night, circle of light, very strong light, perfect circle of light. You see everything. But the stronger that light is, the more you see inside that circle of light, the more difficult it is to understand what happens in the penumbra around that circle of light. So this is what a powerful explanation does. It gives you a real explanation. But it keeps you from, it makes it really difficult to see what is around that. And so I have been at this really, I think, for 30 years. At the beginning, I didn't understand it the way I understand it now, as actually a practice, you know, a research practice, an interpretation practice. But now I expose, I can see that I'm doing that. Now, and so global city. The city was a space that made legible the immobilities, the needs, the dependencies, the interdependencies of capital. What I said about the specialized differences of cities, That's also in the penumbra. They don't compete as much. They can work together, etc., etc. You know, and I have like an endless list of things. I'm not going to do that to you. I don't want to. But now I want to move into the realm of something that I like to think of as making the social. And it also involves, in a way, making territory. And I am particularly interested in the making of the social. And the other one is a question of territory. So the two things that we have sort of not used much are the social and territory. And when it comes to globalization, it has meant a vortex going in one direction, deterritorialization, hypermobility, etc., etc., social. I said already in passing, rich people, fine, there are rich people. And then there are elites. And elites of rich people, elites of intellectuals, elites of brilliant lawyers, whatever. There are lots of elites. But I'm not thinking sort of the top of the pyramid in terms of income and wealth. Those are made. They make elites. They make the social. They make an elite has a strong social component. So I find that elites make the social, and the very disadvantaged make the social. In our modernity, okay? Not in the earlier modernity of the national state, etc. And the middle classes don't make the social. They consume their citizenship. I mean, I'm not trying to... So I'm very interested with how the poor and the disadvantaged, they have had to make the social. They have the skills, they have the capabilities to make it. Not all poor, by the way. Some poverty today is such that you don't even have that. All you have is your body, hungry, undernourished, weak body. Well, in occupying Tahrir Square, that was just not about just sitting in front of the building of the president of the university, which my son did at Yale and then was put in jail. You just sit there, you are disruptive, but you just sit there. Tahrir Square was about making. Same thing with the uprisings of the students in Puerto Rico, Universidad Nacional de Puerto Rico, which controlled the campus for 3 months, started solidarity economy, started growing food, green, it was extra. They made. And Tahrir Square was about making. And that is why there were these real rules, there was a culture. That was extraordinary. And those were to a very large extent, sort of lower middle class and middle class, besides, quite a few, hundreds of thousands of buildings, and you create a new ecology. So the city makes legible, the city makes a condition that it alone makes. Because cars and buildings, they emit greenhouse gases, out there in the field, but it doesn't scale up. My talk is that the city is a space that, besides making legible, now makes acute, and hence makes concrete a growing number of dynamics, events, etc., that are not necessarily urban. Complex cities have outlived kingdoms, republics, empires, and many multinational corporations. They simply have gone on existing across extraordinarily different, sort of social formats. Why? And one quick answer is because they're incomplete. I think that incompleteness is a marking feature of a city. If it is complete, like the intelligent cities, they're sort of closed systems, actually. It is not a city. And it will become obsolete. Source, we say it for open source software making, right? But open source urbanism. And what does that mean? Now, both urbanizing technology and open source urbanism are about maintaining openness, sure, but incompleteness. That is the trick. And so I argue that these intelligent cities are going to be obsolete very, very quickly. They are so complete that obsoleteness threatens them. Hence, are they cities? Or if we look at our good old cities and how they have outlasted all these other forms, it's extraordinary when you think about it. Is that really what we mean today when we use the word city? Is it really cityness, kind of property that has that kind of incompleteness? Again, open source urbanism. Thank you very much.